Welcome to the deep dive. We've spent some time digging into the sources you sent over, and wow, they really hit on something that, well, it feels like it affects pretty much everyone these days.
That's right. We're getting into that constant, sometimes subconscious thing of comparing ourselves to others. Your sources really lay out how it's not just a passing thought, it's kind of woven into our daily lives.
Absolutely. And this comparison game, I mean, based on your material, it's everywhere, isn't it? Appearance, jobs, relationships, how people live, and yeah, definitely all this stuff we see online, the perfect pictures, the likes.
And the real problem, which comes through loud and clear in these sources, is that this constant measuring up, it can literally, as one source puts it, steal your joy. That's a really strong phrase, but it captures the impact well.
It really does. So our goal here, looking specifically at what you provided, is to unpack the why. Why do we even do this? And then how does it actually mess with us? And most importantly, drawing straight from these sources, what can we actually do about it? How do we, stop comparing and focus on our own stuff?
Exactly. And these aren't just, vague self-help tips. The sources offer some specific viewpoints, some research, different ways to think about this whole thing. So yeah, let's get into what they have to say.
Okay, let's do it. So that first question feels fundamental, the why. Why are we humans seemingly wired to constantly look over our shoulder, see what others are doing, and measure ourselves?
Well, a few of the sources touch on the evolutionary perspective. One piece mentions social psychology research, suggesting it's partly, baked into our need to figure out where we stand socially. Way back, comparing help gauge, well, survival chances, resources, who's higher up the ladder.
Ah, so it was actually useful once, a kind of social learning tool.
Pretty much, yeah. See what works, what doesn't, who's succeeding. It helped us navigate the group. It's kind of a natural impulse wanting to orient
But,
ourselves.
and this is where the sources seem to go next. That instinct meets the modern world, and things get, well, messy.
Messy is a good word. Amplified, even. You take that natural tendency, which worked okay in smaller groups, and you throw it into today's world, especially with social media. It just goes haywire.
Hey, why or how?
Well, one article calls it an unnatural environment for our brains. Think about it. Instead of comparing yourself to maybe a few dozen people you actually know and interact with, you're suddenly exposed to thousands, maybe millions, of highly curated, edited versions of lives.
Right. And it's not just the number of people, it's what we're seeing. We're comparing our entire life. The good, the bad, the boring bits, the messy bits.
Exactly. To someone else's highlight reel. One source had a great analogy. It's like comparing your cluttered attic to someone else's perfectly staged living room.
Huh. That's perfect. You see the shiny living room and assume the whole house is like that.
Precisely. We fill in the gaps, and usually we fill them in assuming everything else is just as perfect, which makes us feel worse. That distortion, that's a huge part of the problem your sources identify.
And the impact. Yeah, the sources are pretty blunt about this. It's not just feeling a bit jealous now and then. They talk about real psychological consequences.
Oh, definitely. Several sources link chronic comparison directly to things like lower life satisfaction, more anxiety, even depression.
Uh,
One piece cited a study showing that how often and how intensely you compare yourself upwards, to people you see as better off, that's a major predictor of lower self-esteem. It kind of chips away at your sense of worth.
wow. So it's not just in your head, it's actually doing damage. One source brought up something called comparison anxiety. What do they mean by that exactly?
Yeah, that was interesting. One article defined it as a specific type of social anxiety. It's triggered by that constant self-evaluation against others, and it leads to real distress, this fear of, not measuring up.
Hmm.
It's different from just envy because it can actually stop you from doing things, from chasing your own goals because you're so worried about how you stack up.
That makes total sense.
It-
It shifts from, I wish I had that thing,
Yeah.
to, I'm somehow less because I don't have that thing.
You got it. It turns that gap into a personal failing. So understanding that whole loop, the old instinct, the new environment, the highlight reels, the anxiety it causes, that's kind of step one.
Okay, which leads us right to the big question, the one your sources really seem to focus on. How do we break this cycle? If it's everywhere and it's harmful, what practical things, according to this material, can we actually do?
Right, and this is where the sources get really practical. The number one thing, mentioned again and again in different ways, is building awareness. But specifically, like training yourself to notice the trigger and the feeling itself.
Okay, so catching yourself in the moment, like I'm scrolling, I see something, I feel that little twinge of ugh, and I need to actually notice that. That's comparison happening right there.
Exactly that. One author suggested literally labeling it in your head. Just think comparison thought. That tiny act of naming it creates a little bit of distance. Suddenly you're observing the thought, not just being swept away by it.
That pause.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems really important. Okay, so you notice it. Then what? What do the sources suggest is the next move?
A really common theme is actively shifting your focus. Several sources talked about practicing gratitude. Sounds a bit simple, maybe, but one study they mentioned directly linked doing a daily gratitude practice, like just writing down 3 small things you're genuinely thankful for with actually comparing yourself less often and less intensely.
Huh. So it's not just about feeling nice. It's like it actively pushes back against the comparison impulse by making you focus on what you have, not what others seem to have.
That's the idea. It basically retrains where your brain naturally goes. Another big practical step they discussed is limiting your exposure to the things that trigger the comparison in the first place, especially online.
Right, like cleaning up your social media feeds. More than just unfollowing, maybe.
Yeah, one source suggested really thinking about why certain accounts make you feel that way. Is it the perfect photos, the constant stream of achievements? They recommend actively curating your feed so it's full of stuff that actually inspires you or teaches you something, or just makes you laugh without that side effect of feeling inadequate. Make your online time serve you.
That's smart. Maybe even setting timers, like one source mentioned, if you get sucked into comparison scrolling.
Exactly. Control the input. Another really significant shift they recommend is changing who you compare yourself to. Focus on personal growth, not how you stack up against others.
So instead of, is my career as good as Sarah's? It's, am I further along than I was last year?
Precisely. Comparing yourself to your past self. Your sources call this temporal comparison versus social comparison. It keeps the focus internal on your progress, your journey. One article even suggested keeping a progress journal, not just big wins, but like skills you learned, tough times you got through, moments you were resilient.
That makes sense. It gives you concrete proof you're moving forward on your own track, which fights that whole I'm falling behind feeling.
Totally. And that connects to probably the deepest message running through all these sources. The idea that your worth is inherent. It's not conditional. It doesn't depend on whether you have what someone else has.
That feels like the bedrock, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Just fundamentally knowing you're okay, you're enough, regardless.
it really is. And tied to that, one powerful idea was cultivating self-compassion. Basically, talk to yourself like you'd talk to a good friend who is feeling down about this stuff. Acknowledge that it's hard, it's human to feel insecure sometimes instead of just beating yourself up.
Okay, so let's recap those steps based on the sources. First, really sharpen that awareness. Notice the trigger, label a thought. Second, practice gratitude. Actively focus on what you have. Third, curate your environment, limit triggers, especially online. Fourth, track and celebrate your own progress, compare yourself to your past self. And fifth, really work on internalizing that your worth is inherent. You are enough.
That's a great summary. And underpinning all of it, the sources stress being kind to yourself in the process. It's not about never comparing again, it's probably impossible, but about noticing it, managing it, and not letting it define you.
Right. And they also mentioned seeking support, right? Like talking to a friend or even just writing stuff down can take away some of its power.
Definitely. And they also pulled out some really powerful little phrases, almost like mantras, that you can use when you feel that comparison urge rising. You mentioned inherent worth. One source had, you are enough, just as you are. Simple, but powerful.
Yeah, I like that. And the timeline thing, you're not behind in life, you're just on your own path. That one really landed for me reading the material.
Another good one was focus on being better than yesterday, not better than someone else. Really captures that shift to personal growth.
Maybe my favorite, just to combat that feeling of not being special enough that comparison can create. No one is you, and that is your power. These feel like actual tools you can grab onto.
They really are. Look, navigating this modern world with all its pressures and curated images, it's tough. But what this deep dive into your sources shows is that there is a path forward. It's based on understanding ourselves better and using some really practical strategies.
Yeah. Ultimately, the message seems to be that life isn't some kind of competition with everyone on the same track. Your path is yours. It's unique. It has value just as it is.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, the most helpful final thought to take away from all this material, the overall vibe, is that despite feeling like you're falling short sometimes, chances are you're actually doing better than you think.
That's definitely something worth holding on to. A really powerful place to end.